Hello and welcome to the home of the Ghost Owl. Continuing our Warhammer The Old World content, we're on part 2 now of the Universal Special Rules. There's going to be a couple more parts at least to come. It's a pretty big section. There are lots of Universal Special Rules, and I think it's important to go through them in detail because, as I've said in the previous video, it's these special rules which can really set units apart from being top tier, middle tier, and bottom tier. So let's have a look at the special rules in this episode. So first up is extra attacks, pretty straightforward. A model with this special rule has a modifier to its attacks as determined by the number in brackets. If the number is a dice roll, then you roll when the model's unit is chosen to fight in the combat phase. Always going to be a good thing to get extra attacks. So, fast cavalry. If all the models in the unit have this rule and are in open order, the unit may perform a quick turn even if it marched. Well, if you're playing a sort of a light fast cavalry unit, then this is only going to give you more mobility. More mobility on these sort of units is going to be critical. They're generally not going to be strong or have lots of armor, but they could give you a critical flank or even rear attack to give you that important combat result bonuses. So, yeah, never a bad thing. So, fear. A model with this rule causes fear. If a unit charges a fear-causing unit that has a higher unit strength, it must first pass a leadership test. If the leadership test is failed, the unit remains in place and is considered to have failed the charge. If a unit is in combat with a fear-causing enemy that has a higher unit strength, then before rolling to hit, it must first pass a leadership test. If failed, the unit has a -1 to hit modifier. A unit will only take one fear test per turn, and models that cause fear are also immune to fear themselves. A fear-causing character that joins a non-fear-causing unit does not make the unit immune to fear. So don't think that you're going to bring in a fear-causing character to suddenly give your entire unit immunity to fear. That doesn't work. So fear overall, how does it look? At first glance, it looks pretty good. I mean, if you've got leadership modifiers out there, that could be quite interesting, if there's spells, that sort of stuff. But either way, you could, particularly against enemies that have that sort of medium to low leadership, they're going to really struggle against fear-causing armies. They're not going to be able to charge them. That could be a problem. In combat, that -1 to hit modifier also, it's never a good thing. So overall, it looks pretty good. One of the things that's been come about in the past is that either fear was not good or you paid quite a tax in points to have a fear-causing model, which at the same time is then not good. So it'll, again, you're going to have to build some army lists, put them on the table and see. But initially, as a rule, it looks good. Hopefully, you're not paying too much of a tax to have fear as an ability. Okay, next up, feigned flight. If this unit decides to flee as a charge reaction, it automatically rallies at the end of its move. So initially, it's not bad in terms of a rule. I think positioning is going to be key if you're intending on using this because it is still fleeing, even though it rallies at the end of its move. So if it does flee through a friendly unit, then you will have to take a panic test. So you need to be careful on the positioning of your units to not cause unnecessary panic tests. But overall, it could be interesting for baiting enemy units forward and to get them caught in the flank. So fight in extra rank. Models with this rule may make supporting attacks. Well, that's always going to be great. Any extra attacks, welcome. And that's basically giving the whole second rank attacks as well. Though always remember, supporting attacks can only be made in the frontal arc. Yeah, that's definitely a good thing. Fire and flee. A unit with this special rule may elect to fire and flee as its charge reaction. The unit will stand and shoot and then perform a flee move as normal in the charge reaction section. And then when rolling for the flee move, the unit will roll 2d6 and discard the lowest result. So you do have a penalty for doing this. You will risk being caught by the enemy unit. So I think whether you use this ability will be quite dependent on how close the enemy has got to you. Like, do you think you can truly escape, given that you're only going to be getting 1d6 worth of movement? Granted, you roll 2 and you get the highest result, but you can still roll 2 2s or, a 3 and a 2 or whatever, and you're only moving 3 inches. So an interesting one. Nice that you can potentially be able to shoot, but you could well be risking your entire unit by doing this. Yeah, I think this is very much, again, positioning. How far away are you from the charging unit? Do you think you've got a good chance of escaping? So first charge on a unit's first charge of the game. If it is successful, the charged target becomes disrupted until the end of the turn. That's a great rule to disrupt the enemy unit. Taking away rank bonuses is going to be great for that combat result. So I mean, and it's the first charge of the game, so you can pretty much save your cavalry unit that's got this. Wait until the right moment, and then really hit an elite enemy unit pretty hard, and where potentially they might have a good combat result because of the size of the unit, you can take some or a lot of that away. So first charge, I really like. I think that's going to be really interesting on a nice heavy cavalry unit that doesn't have frenzy. If it's got frenzy, then it's going to be a problem because you want to be able to choose which unit you're going to charge with this to get the most from it. So next up, flaming attacks. Attacks made with this special rule are flaming attacks. Flaming attacks cause fear in war beasts and swarms, and both shooting and combat attacks are flaming unless specified otherwise through those spells are unaffected. So unless it says otherwise, both shooting and combat attacks are flaming. I think it's interesting, causing fear in war beasts and swarms. So flaming attack archers, for example, could be really quite an interesting one, in those war beasts and swarms. So yeah, I think, overall, I mean, you're not going to see that many war beasts and swarms, but I still think that has flaming attacks could be quite interesting. Plus, there's also the flammable rule, which we're going to be coming on to next. Again, it depends upon the points cost you're paying to get these flaming attacks. So flammable models with this special rule cannot make a regeneration save against flaming attacks. So in the past, you've had things like hydras and hellpit abominations, and I know they're in legacy armies, but flaming attacks was a good way of taking them down because they couldn't make their regeneration save. But here you need a flammable rule for that. So remains to be seen again how many models are going to be affected by flammable, as to whether flaming attacks is also that beneficial. Like I say, depends upon how many points you're going to pay for this ability. Hopefully not much. I don't think this is an uber special rule in the game. A bit more situational, I would say. So fly. Fly in the past has been a really great thing, so is it still? So a model with a special rule can fly. Models can choose to fly or move normally on the ground. The distance a model flies is shown in the brackets. Okay, so you're going to expect the model to fly a lot further than it can move on the ground. So how often are you going to move on the ground? Probably rarely, unless there's some spell or something that means you can't fly. Models that choose to fly move normally, except they're able to freely pass above other units and terrain features without penalty, and flying units can march within 8 inches of an enemy unit without needing to pass leadership tests. That's very cool. I like that a lot. Models that choose to fly will suffer difficult terrain penalties if they end their move on it, so try not to land in difficult terrain. Models that choose to fly cannot end their move on impassable terrain or within 1 inch of an enemy unit. That's pretty standard. Models that fly must begin and end their movement on the ground. So that's, again, something to think about. I think there was a question earlier about flying units and line of sight and being able to see through friendly units on the assumption that if you're flying, of course, you can see through, but you cannot, because it is assumed that when they are not moving, they are on the ground. Therefore, they will be blocked line of sight by their own units and other things. So that is definitely one to keep in mind. Just because they're flying doesn't mean they're actually hovering in the air. It actually means that they're actually on the ground, which will be interesting for units on flying bases. So I'm thinking sort of Pegasus Knights, because their movement begins and ends on the ground, and yet if you're looking at true line of sight from the model, they're quite high up. So that is actually an interesting one. And if we notice, when we saw the Bretonnian Lord on the Pegasus, he was actually on the ground. Does that mean future flying units will not be on flying bases? Don't know. Characters that cannot fly cannot join units that can. Pretty straightforward there. Okay, next up, Frenzy. A frenzied model has a +1 modifier to its attacks characteristic, but this modifier does not apply to riders or mounts that do not have it. So just because your rider has Frenzy, the mount doesn't get it. Just because the monster has Frenzy, the rider does not get it. If the majority of a unit has Frenzy, the unit automatically passes Fear, Panic, or Terror tests. A unit that contains at least one frenzied model must charge if it's able to do so, and that's the kicker, right? So, but there are things that you can do, again, with clever positioning of your own units. You can actually block the ability for your frenzied unit being able to charge, and therefore you can negate some of that. But again, it comes down to that positioning. So initially that seems like a problem, but you can actually move block yourself to stop it being frenzied. The other one to watch out for is that marching column. We touched upon it before. If you're in marching column and you're frenzied, you've got a problem. You're going to be locked in place, because in marching column, you're able to declare a charge, but you're not able to move. So a frenzied unit in marching column will be locked in place, unable to do anything, and that is a big problem. So do not put your frenzied models in marching column, but do move block them when you don't want them to charge. If the majority of the models in the unit are frenzied, then it cannot choose to flee as a charge reaction, and it cannot choose to restrain after combat. So but essentially you lack a bit of movement control of the unit. And for me, the +1 modifier to the attacks is good. Losing control of the unit and not being, bearing in mind that I feel that the most important phase in this game is the movement phase, and it's all about positioning. Not being able to potentially control that positioning is a problem. So is Frenzy worth the +1 attack and the Fear, Panic, and Terror? Maybe, but I would say it has more benefit on a slower unit that can't move itself crazily out of position. If you've got this on a cavalry unit, it's going to be off all over the board doing things. So, yeah, I think actually the benefit, you can get a lot from it if it's on a slower unit that doesn't get pulled out of position so easily. Models that lose a round of combat automatically lose this special rule. So that's, again, you could be paying a points tax for this rule, but this is actually a rule that you'll pay points for, but you can actually lose if you lose a round of combat. And again, the fact that you have to charge, you can be baited easier. Frenzy, I'm not sold on this as a rule that I want that much in my army. Furious Charge, a unit with this rule that makes a charge move of 3 inches or more gain +1 to attacks. So, yeah, extra attacks, always good. Furious Charge, again, if you got that with some knights, some heavy cavalry, they're going to need all those extra attacks because heavy cavalry and its points cost, they're going to have good armor save, but they're not going to have the bodies compared to the infantry units they may be going up against. So any extra attack to remove those attacks back is going to be key. And that's really what you want to be doing with those heavy cavalry units. You need to be causing enough casualties that the enemy unit can't attack back or is only attacking back with a couple of attacks. That's going to be the important one. A Furious Charge is only going to help that. Right, Hatred X, a model with this special rule, may re-roll failed rolls to hit against a hated enemy during the first round of combat. Enemies that are hated will be shown in brackets. So we've seen this before in things like the elves in particular, for example. High elves hated dark elves hated high elves. There are some chaos units that hated all enemies. Re-rolling your failed rolls to hit in the first round of combat is not a bad thing. If you're stuck in a second round of combat, then it's probably pretty even overall because you've been re-rolling your hits. But this is going to give you that extra advantage to try and win in the first round, do as much damage, take little casualties back. So, like I say, if you're in the second round, you're probably in a decent situation anyway. So, Hatred, pretty useful. It doesn't give you any negative things. That's my issue with Frenzy. It's got some positive, but it's got some big negatives, and those big negatives affecting movement. So there we go. That brings us to the end of part 2. There's still plenty of these special rules to go. Sticking to my plan of keeping these episodes within a reasonable time limit, without going information overload, without just reading the book out page by page, and being here for hours. It's really just taking snapshots of these rules, looking at them, how they impact, and I say we will keep going with these. So there's plenty still to go. So please bear with me, and again, please bear with me on the quality of the sound. I am missing having my PC and an excellent internet connection so much, and I can't wait to get it back at the beginning of March. If you found this video useful, though, give it a thumbs up. If you didn't, give it a thumbs down. Let me know why in the comments down below. And in the comments down below, also let me know what you think of these special rules and how they work, and if you think there's value in them and no value in them, or what units you think they will work best with. If you want to see more content, though, please hit that subscribe button. It is totally free for you to do, and it means a massive amount for me, so thank you for that in advance. You've been watching The Ghost Owl, and I'll see you all very, very soon.